showed me why. Instead of asking why, start asking why not. Time flies when you're having fun. Time flies when you're lying in the sun. Bit by bit, the older that we get, the faster it tick, 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 ticks. Time flies. Whoa, whoa, time flies.
Good afternoon, Lyndall Fraker here again today with Marshfield's Old School Times. Happy to have another two-timer now, John Black, Representative John Black with us today. John, thanks for coming by.
Glad to be here, Lyndall.
I can tell you're excited, John. No, you're a two-timer. We've only got two or three two-timers, Stan Whitehurst and Champ Heron, I think. So you're in an elite club now that's been back by our show.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, John, we appreciate you accepting my invitation today. Marshfield School Time is a story about, or is a show about documented history. We've been going on a little over a year now, and it's been a lot of fun, and we've really enjoyed having all the guests that we've had on, and we're going to continue doing what we do here to document history for future generations. A big part of history, whether we like it or not, is certainly the political spectrum that we are in right now. The primary season, which ends next Tuesday. This has been quite a year this year with some of the primary races, and I thought it would be good to have John come by. And we're not going to go down a path of certainly negativism or not necessarily here to tell you that if you don't vote for my candidate, you're doomed to something that isn't good for you. But I will say that there's some issues out there that people should understand. And I think I've had a lot of people contact me, some on social media, some face to face. What does this mean? What is this China land deal? What's this, some of these topics that maybe we can explain a little bit better. John has been in the legislature 6 years now, and are going on 6 years, and I was up there 8 years, and then spent 4 with the Department of Health. And we're just going to lay it out there and tell you why some of these topics are there, and why people maybe should understand them better. Because I can tell you that the rhetoric during this campaign season, we say this every time, is worse than it's ever been. But it truly is. And the hatred that develops from that, not just amongst the candidates, I think many times the candidates put their differences aside after the elections are over and become friends, just as some of my opponents have with me in the past. But I do think it develops a lot of hatred amongst folks, amongst voters, and it causes division within the parties, within the groups that form out there, because of the dissension that we have going on in our nation right now. And that's from the federal government, elected officials, all the way down to the state officials, and sometimes even local officials. So we want to talk about the issues. We want to make sure people understand what they're voting on. Certainly may give you my opinion, and John may too, on who we like, because we may have a personal reason that we want to vote for someone. And that's fine. And everybody should know who they're going to vote for by now. This is the weekend prior to the election on Tuesday. So, John, we're going to get started. Thanks, Logan Fraker, our producer today, for being back with us. And thank Dennis Beck for our theme song. And let's get started with this. I'm not sure where this is going to go. We're, as we do with all of our shows, it's a conversation. And we hope that it'll be helpful. So I think I thought what we might do, John, is just kind of start with the governor's race, because it seems like the governor's race is probably the most, I'm not going to say controversial, but certainly one that people are, there's a lot of contrast between the candidates and what they're saying about each other. And I'm not sure that all of them get it just exactly right. But I think it would be noteworthy to mention that the campaign contribution process is kind of where I thought we might start. A candidate has a fund that they can set up through the Missouri Ethics Commission, that they pretty much control. They'll have a treasurer. They may select someone, a friend or an accountant or an acquaintance to oversee that fund for them. And that's been in place for many, many years. But then in addition to that, there are funds set up called PACs. PAC. What's that stand for, John?
Political Action Committee.
Political Action Committee. And these PACs are set up such, and this was all done through legislation or through, I guess, maybe a vote of will of the people, right?
Right.
Through Clean Missouri a few years ago, maybe.
And Clear, Missouri.
Cleaner Missouri. These were set up so the candidates don't really have a lot of control over them as far as the money, what comes in, what goes out. Now, they will tell you that they don't have a lot of control about what the ads and what the campaign will say with that money or do with that money, but I'm not so sure about that. I think many candidates can control that more than they do, and they use that as an excuse. John, give me your 2 cents on the campaign finance with the two funds and kind of how you see this.
I will, Lyndall, and I agree with most of your intro, not all of it, but most of it. And I was just wondering if I was going to get a chance to talk here.
You've never agreed with everything that I've said.
Yeah, the PAC situation is something that folks don't understand, but if they listen carefully or watch carefully their TV ads or their radio ads and look at the flyers that come, there's a paid for line at the bottom, and law requires that the payor of the ad be identified. And if it says something PAC or Political Action Committee, then it's one of these PACs that don't have to follow the same rules as a campaign committee. Campaign committee will usually say citizens to elect somebody, or citizens for Lyndall Fraker. Mine is committee to elect John Black. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. Like, what was yours? You remember?
Committee to elect Lyndall Fraker.
And those campaign committees, like you talked about, are tightly regulated. The amount of money that can be put into those that can be given to a candidate for a House of Representatives, I presume we're talking mostly about state elections this year, is $2,000 from any contributor. And a lot of contributors that would like to give a lot more money than that are banned, cannot give money to a regular campaign committee, like corporations, for example. Labor unions cannot give money to a regular campaign committee. So this PAC situation has been set up, and it just basically completely destroys the limitations that are placed on campaign committees for big races. For a small race like a House race, those limitations probably make sense. But when you get into Missouri Senate race and above, all the money to speak of is being spent by the PACs.
Yeah.
And for example, I don't have a PAC. I don't need a PAC.
Right.
But as in a House race, but in a Senate race, then so these corporate contributions come in, and there can be very large individual contributions above, say, $2,000, $2,500, or whatever it is for a statewide race. Contributions to PAC are far beyond that, thousands and thousands of dollars in some cases. And as you said, the candidate is not supposed to be able to control that PAC, but they have associates who they have assigned to run the PAC, and of course those people have a pretty good idea what those people would want. And all the really awful ads you see out there, awful in the sense of very negative,
Right,
are put on by the PACs.
Yeah. So just to get this, put this in layman's terms, since I'm a layman and John's an attorney, John Black is a candidate. You don't have a PAC, but if you did have one, let's say you were running for Senate or on up the line, a statewide office, you would probably have to have a PAC. So as an individual, if Lyndall Fraker wants to give a donation to your campaign account without a PAC, then I can give $2,000.
If it's a House race.
If it's a House race.
I think a Senate race is $2,500.
$2,500. Melanie Fraker could give you $2,000 as well, correct?
That is correct.
And Landon Fraker could give you $2,000, or Logan Fraker, whatever. But individually, $2,000. If let's say the Retro Zone Arcade, which is a business, wanted to give you, it's an LLC, wanted to give you a donation, they couldn't give you a donation as a corporation as an individual?
It depends if the LLC is set up as a individual for an individual
Okay.
for immunity purposes, or if it's a corporation. If it's an LLC that's set up really just to protect the individual from potential liability, that's okay. But
Okay.
the corporate ones,
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
clearly,
Well, let's give another example. So let's say Roast Ready Mix.
yeah, Roast
I
Ready.
work for Roast.
Right.
Roast Ready Mix wanted to give John Black some money. Then they couldn't give it to your campaign account. It would have to go to a PAC.
That's right.
Yeah, but Darren Clare could give you 2,000, or Carm Clare could, or whatever.
That's
So,
right.
okay, so the corporations, so you have to set up PACs in order for big corporations to give money to a campaign.
And the sad situation is, you say you have to. Why do you have to? You have to because if you want to run for one of these Senate races or statewide races, they're so incredibly expensive
Right.
that
Right.
individuals with the limits on individual contributions could never fund
Right.
a
One,
$500,000 race.
just, you'd spend $2,000 on a couple of 3 radio ads in prime time, just, and that's it. So they've got to be able to accept this big money. So that's, well, that's good, John. Thank you for explaining that, because I think it's very confusing to people as to why we have to have the 2 accounts, and why the PAC account is so remotely separate from the campaign, the candidate campaign account that they ultimately totally control. But the PAC account is controlled by, another, you might say, another board of, or a group of people that really the candidate is not supposed to have a lot of input with. Again, though, whoever that is going to have a relationship with those people enough to know that those people will do what the candidate they think would want them to do when it came to the advertising.
Yeah.
Now,
in my first
yeah.
race, I had another entity. Another entity can run an ad too. So it doesn't have to be the PAC. It doesn't have to be you. It can be a third party
Yeah.
that can pay for an ad.
Yeah.
And as long as they disclose it, and I had people who supported
Yeah.
me, friends of mine, who were confused because some other entity that I had nothing to do with whatsoever ran an ad that I wouldn't have run. And so some of my friends were upset about that ad. And when I explained to them, I have nothing to do with
Yeah.
it. Somebody just ran that ad for me because they thought it would be helpful. And maybe it was, but I personally would not have run that ad.
And that could even be a group like Americans for Prosperity or United Citizens of Missouri. Well, I'm just making it up, but I mean, it could be some group that you have no, maybe even tie to.
That's right.
But they looked at your resume and they looked at you as a candidate and compared you to another candidate, and determined that they wanted to support you. They liked your beliefs and thoughts. So
that's right.
Yeah. And so there is legitimacy to that happening out there all the time, and you truly don't have control over that. So, okay, so let's move into the governor's race. You've got 3 dominant candidates. I think there's more than that on the Republican side. On the Democrat side, you have basically 2 dominant candidates. You have let's see, Crystal Quaid, who is the majority floor leader in the Missouri House on the Democrat side, and then Mike Hammer, who is Sam Hammer's son. Sam Hammer owns a lot of the Wendy stores around Southwest Missouri. There are 2 other candidates, Hollis Laster and Eric Morrison. All this information is in this week's Marshfield Mail, by the way, a really good page here that Shelby and the team down there put together and I'm sure Stan, the county clerk's input here, a sample ballot, you might say. So you've got choices there on the Democrat side. And we're predominantly going to talk about the Republican side because that's what John and I are, Republicans, and we know these candidates personally in some cases. The 3 prominent candidates are Jay Ashcroft, Mike Kehoe, and Bill Eigel. Chris Wright has also made a little bit of noise, and then there's about another 6 or 8 on here that I don't know anything about, don't know who they are. But so the 3 front runners that you hear so much in the advertising and so forth, Ashcroft, Kehoe, and Eigel. Jay Ashcroft's our current Secretary of State. Mike Kehoe's our current Lieutenant Governor. Bill Eigel is a current state senator from the St. Charles area. Kehoe's from I think his farm is in Dixon, Missouri. And then he also resides in Jeff City with his job as lieutenant governor, and was a car dealer there for many years. And then Jay Ashcroft also lives in Jeff City, I believe. So uh, some of the issues that are surrounding this race that we hear a lot about is selling land to China. We hear things about obviously gas tax. We hear the border wall, the Texas border wall, as a topic that they talk about a lot. We also hear about I know Eigel specifically wanting to eliminate personal property tax. So I think those are the hot topics. Things like back the blue, backing police is also something that you hear them talk about. Stopping the woke agenda in public schools, fair and honest elections. That gets a little more into the Secretary of State race, but that's also been touched upon in their race. So, John, I think one of the most confusing topics that I've been approached by is this China land topic. And so I thought we might start with that, talk a little bit about that, try to explain what people even, what they mean by that. You want to go on, take that from there for a minute?
Sure, I'll start on that. A lot of that started, as you know, before I was in the legislature. There was a limitation on the amount of foreign ownership of land. It wasn't necessarily China back at that time. It was just foreign ownership of land. And a limitation was put in at 1%. And I won't try to.
I think that's 2013.
And yeah, you're familiar with that more than I am. But since then, there have been efforts to reduce that or restrict that in some way, and there have been some bills that I voted on while I've been up there that would make inroads into that fairly basic limitation. But I think I'll let you talk about how that came to be.
Sure.
And what happened when you were there.
Well, back in 2013, I'd been up there about 2 years at that time. There was a big push to take part of the St. Louis airport. They called it Aerotropolis, and basically sell or lease a big chunk of that to an entity or entities that would make this what they called a China hub. There was so much trade, international trade between the United States and China at the time, and quite frankly, and I'm speaking for, I think if you go back and check the voting records of all the legislature at that time, it was pretty overwhelming the way it was presented, that we needed to Missouri needed to capitalize more on the trade between the two countries. And we had a part of the airport that was not being utilized because I think we lost a particular airline or something at the time. Can't remember which one it was. Moved out, and so there was a big chunk that was available, and it was a big topic. I know Senator Schmidt, who's now our U.S. Senator, was, if I'm not mistaken, the handler of the bill on the Senate side. Was very popular. Jay Nixon was the governor, but the House and the Senate were both controlled by the Republicans, and so they pushed for this China hub, is what we called it, or Aerotropolis legislation. With that, at that same time, there was also a big purchase made by a holding company out of China. I can't remember if it was WH Holdings or something like that purchased the whole Smithfield food conglomeration in the United States. There were plants all over the United States, several states. Can't remember how many, but multiple states had facilities that employed thousands of people, that kept people in jobs, but they were producing pork products. The hog farmers, the hog industry in Missouri was supportive of this. It was a very large thing for that industry to be able to sell to sell this Smithfield Foods, to sell to this company that were owned primarily by Chinese investors. It was not the China government. The government of China did not buy this land. It was corporations that had Chinese investors involved. Just as, for example, there's 340 some Walmart stores in China. There's over 6,000 McDonald's in China. You know, we have that international trade that's been in place now for probably since the Nixon administration, when Nixon went over there and made the first presidential visit to China for many years. And that's all been obviously in the works, and building, and that international trade has just grown over the years. So there was not this dissension that we seem to have today with China, and rightfully so at that time. This was 9 years ago, 10 years ago. And so, as John mentioned, there was some old law in the books that said foreign entities couldn't own any land, I believe, in Missouri. Some old statute that was being ignored. It had been challenged. There was nothing to put teeth in. So that's when they came to the legislature with this new bill to pass. So they limited that to 1%. Well, the Smithfield purchase was going to involve, if I'm not mistaken, around 46,000 acres, I believe. And at the time, 1% would have been 250,000 acres, I think. So it was still a portion of the total amount of land that could be purchased by foreign entities. Canada owned so many thousand acres already as well. And other countries may have, and not countries, but investors from other countries own some land. Just like I'm sure we have American investors that own land in France or wherever, other countries. So that's kind of what that bill was about. It passed overwhelmingly. The bill was sponsored by Representative Casey Guernsey, who's from Northwest Missouri, who was involved in the farming industry up there, the hog farming industry. And again, it wasn't really that controversial at the time. So that's where they're kind of making an issue, specifically, I think, more with Kehoe, but also with Ashcroft on another situation that has came up with China land. But the Kehoe thing was stemmed from that, because he voted for that bill just like I did, and probably 90% of the legislature did. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but that's where that came from. So I know since then, and since our relations with China have changed over the years, I know Lieutenant Governor Kehoe has emphatically said that he proposes banning any foreign adversary such as China from owning land of any kind in Missouri to protect our food supply and national security, going forward. So, and I'm sure the others have said the same thing. So that's a little bit about that topic. Anything else there, John?
Yeah, some of these say somebody voted 4 times to do this. Well, as you and I both know, sometimes it takes 4 times or more to get a single bill passed.
Right.
It'll be in the original committee. There might be an amendment in committee. It might come to the floor. There might be 2 or 3 amendments on the floor. Then there'll be a preliminary vote, and then there'll be a final vote. So to say they voted 4 times, that might have only been one issue. And since I've been there, the bills that have come up are along the lines that Lieutenant Governor Kehoe has described, to limit ownership of enemies of the state, basically.
Right.
Because, I mean, think about it. Are we going to ban Canada? Are we going to ban people from England owning property in the United States? It's not nearly as simple as some of these ads would make.
So, in other words, your condo over in London next to the Queen's Palace, you wouldn't be able to own that, would you?
I couldn't wave at the Queen. I hope everybody knows we're kidding here a little bit.
Okay, well, that's a little bit about that. I can assure you that again, all 3 candidates would not want foreign entities owning land next to military bases or something like that. I do think there had been an issue come up about some China investment company maybe owning a piece of ground close to Whiteman Air Force Base, and I don't remember the details of that, but that had been a topic that had came up. Kehoe never voted on that, or that wasn't anything that he did, and I don't know that Ashcroft did either. But it didn't go through. But
well, of course, Secretary said Ashcroft hasn't voted on anything.
Right.
He's not a member of the legislature.
Right. But he did testify, didn't he, on something?
I think he testified and took some flack over that testimony.
Yeah.
But Secretary Ashcroft is a fine fellow, and his father was in my view, nearly an American hero. that doesn't necessarily mean that he has any track record in the legislature that we could really follow.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And then the other thing I want to mention, especially when it comes to this race, but this you'll see that this occurs in every race anymore, even down to the local level. You're going to hear a lot in this campaign, more than we've ever heard about fighting. You know, this candidate's going to fight the establishment. They're going to fight the rhinos. We're going to fight the status quo. And I think, from my perspective, we've moved into territory within the Republican Party. Not saying that the Democrat Party doesn't do it as well. As a matter of fact, I think if you look back about 20 years ago, they experienced this same kind of infighting, we'll call it in the family fighting, when they moved further to the left, when they went from what we used to know as the old Truman Blue Dog Democrat Party of Missouri, very union, very rural, agricultural dominated, into a more liberal party like they have nationally. They went through this same thing, and that's when they lost control and lost the power that they had known prior to that in the Missouri House and the Senate. And now we're doing the same thing within our party, within the Republican Party, the infighting, the in-family fighting, because you can't just be a Republican. You got to be darn near a libertarian. I mean, you can't if you've been up there longer than, say, 4 years, then you're establishment, or you're status quo, or whatever. If you try to go along to get along, or if you try to be diplomatic to come together to get something done, and if you don't keep a hard stance in line with whatever this new entity, they're called freedom fighters or whatever, the fighters, then they want to throw you out, throw the baby out with the bathwater, basically. And I don't think it's healthy. I think it's causing a lot of hate and division in our party. As a matter of fact, the hatred on social media is unprecedented today, and I find it quite offensive as a Christian, and I think most Christians should and do, that we can name call and do all the things we do during an election season, and then go to church on Sunday morning and hear more about the love of Jesus or whatever it might be. So I think it's just something to think about as you're going to the polls on Tuesday. If you're looking at candidates that are wanting to fight and throw the establishment or the status quo out, I mean, that's your choice. But let's really get to the underlying issues and see why and what it is they're wanting to throw out. Are they wanting to throw you out because you've built the relationships, you've built friendships with other legislators? My very best friend in the legislature is a representative from Northeast Missouri, the furthest district to the north. We communicate almost weekly and still are buddies, and we're going to have dinner together one of these days here pretty soon. And I think those relationships help whenever we want to get something done. If we want to get, I'll just tell you, we got some money for a local sewer system here in Marshfield, thanks to the relationship that John Black and Curtis Trent had with the Appropriations Chairman of the Senate, Lincoln Huff, the Appropriations Chairman of the House, Cody Smith, and the relationships that we have with the governor's office to be able to get those bills across the finish line. And those are important. They're important. And if you're going to be up there shooting your flamethrower or throwing hardballs at the other side all the time and holding up legislation or holding up getting something done, I don't think it's healthy.
No, in fact, it's far from healthy. And the social media attacks that we see, not only on politicians, but they certainly bear their share, in my view, are just un-American. I mean, for people to say anything they want to say without any real knowledge of the situation and just be mean, and in some cases anonymous, that's not what I understand citizenship to be.
That's right.
That it's just almost a curse. And politicians deal with it all the time, and so do a lot of other people. And I don't know how anybody thinks that really helps anything to pop off about something and be mean about it, and particularly when they really don't have a good understanding of the facts. And like you're talking about these ads that are running on TV and radio today, I've had a lot of people tell me, I they're all terrible, and they give me no ability to distinguish between the candidates. And they, according to one ad, all their other opponents want to sell land in China, and all their other opponents want to raise taxes, and they're all saying the same thing, all about each other. So how in the world, when you have that kind of thing going on, does just a member of the public who maybe doesn't have some inside information like you and I might have, make any decision as to who they're to vote for?
That's right. And that's why we're here today. We're trying to at least explain and sort some of this out for at least those that see our podcast. And maybe you have friends you can share this information with, and take it for what it is and use it if you can, if it helps you in your decision making. So I thought, just for fun, I brought a few of the flyers that come in the mail. I'm not going to really get into names. That's not what I'm here about. I don't want to give them any publicity for their flyer, but I thought I could at least mention some things to you. Like, for example, this particular candidate for governor put our military at risk when he lobbied for China to buy farmland miles from U.S. military bases. Well, Chinese gate crashers at U.S. bases spark espionage concerns. I mean, Chinese migrants are the fastest growing group crossing from Mexico into the U.S. at southern border. That may be true. I agree with that. But I don't know that this particular candidate had anything to do with those Chinese migrants being the fastest growing group crossing from Mexico into the U.S. southern border. But the way they want to portray this, that this gentleman lobbied for China to buy land next to our military base, I just don't believe that. Now, that he may have testified about some reason that land was going to be purchased, but I just find it hard to believe. Here's another one. This guy created loopholes for China to exploit. I don't know. I don't know if he did or not, but well, I'm gonna wait on that one. Wants to sell Missouri's land piece by piece. Missouri ranks third among all states where China owns the most land. Well, that's 43,071 acres, and I think I read where every bit of that is the Smithfield food purchase that we just talked about. The hog producers, Now, do we, as a free country, a free corporate country, do we want to control who can purchase our businesses? Do we want to do that? Do we want the government to say, John, you can't sell your junk business, to the guy over here, that guy from China? You can't do that. Do we want the government to do that, control our lives like that? I don't know. I mean, that question's came up though.
Boy, I sure hope you weren't talking about my valuable antique.
Yeah, your valuable antiques that are in the attic of your garage over there that Cynthia calls junk.
Let's talk about that a little
yeah,
more. I mean,
yeah.
as far as I know, the state of Missouri does not have a border with Mexico.
That's correct. Yes, that's correct.
And so all these ads that somehow one individual is going to stop illegal immigration is almost an insult to the intelligence of the people of Missouri. I've got one here. I got this text that this candidate will deport illegals.
I've heard that. That's one of the governor candidates.
Yeah.
Going to do it on day one, I think.
I think it's going to round them up.
I'll just tell you, that's Bill Eigels who said that, because the other two didn't say that.
Put him in his pickup and take him back.
Well,
I mean, I don't know, but
how's he going to find it? How's he going to find where they are? Are they going to shut down the Mexican restaurants? I mean, we all kind of like the Mexican restaurants around here.
Well,
where are they going to get them at?
There are a few problems with that.
Yeah.
Other than the ones that we've already mentioned, the province of deporting illegal persons in this nation is within the authority of the national government.
Right.
not the state governments. And so I'm really not sure how that's going to be done. And there's no doubt that this immigration problem is a gigantic problem. But in my mind, yeah, these people coming over illegally that the federal government has dropped the ball on
Absolutely.
by not monitoring them, by letting them across and setting up this amnesty program that takes years for them actually to ever be adjudged whether or not they truly have amnesty or not. The gigantic problem. But it's really a federal problem. And what can we do about it? Well, not a whole lot, frankly. I mean, we sent some National Guard, and I voted for spending the money to send National Guard to Texas to help those folks there on the line, but they really weren't intercepting people. They were providing support for those authorized persons to do that, the Border Patrol.
Yeah.
So some of these things, and on top of that, well, I'm going to deport aliens. Well, it's really in the federal government's authority. And secondly, how are you going to do that? That's going to take money to do that, to appropriate money to do anything requires the approval of the General Assembly. So this, and we see this all the time,
Right.
and it's, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. Again, that's almost an insult to the intelligence of people.
Well, and I think even along those same lines, people think that a governor has executive privilege to do some things, and they do. But just like you mentioned, when Governor Parsons sent some troops, some National Guard troops down to help Governor Abbott in Texas, the legislature still voted on that. You guys voted on that.
We funded it.
The governor, you had to fund it. The governor didn't just do it without your approval. And everybody forgets that a governor does not draft legislation. Now they may talk a representative or a senator into an issue and get them to sponsor it, but a governor can't sponsor legislation that comes through the legislature. It has to be done by a senator or a representative. So that's why it's important to have good relationships with the governor's office. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you right now, and I don't care to say this, there was more legislation passed, good legislation. We got more done when Governor Nixon was the governor with a Republican Senate and House, because we had majorities and we could override Nixon if we wanted to. We got more stuff done then than they have in the last 4 years because of this dissension amongst these certain senators that don't want to see things happen because they don't like the governor or they don't like whatever it is they don't like and don't like leadership in the Senate. And so I think last year, John, you all sent 20 some bills to the governor's desk to get passed. Normally, you would send 120 to 150, right?
Way more than 29.
Right.
You may get around to talking about why that was the case, but yes, you're right.
Well, let's talk about it. Why was that the case?
In the Missouri House, and Missouri House and Missouri Senate have essentially the same overwhelming Republican majority. In the Missouri House, as it was when Lyndall was a representative, we can pass just about whatever it is we want to pass because we have that majority. The Senate has the same majority, but they aren't able to pass legislation like the House can because of the filibuster. The filibuster is a procedural tool that people hear about often in the federal government where one or two people or a small group of people can hold up legislation by standing up on the floor and not releasing the floor to allow anything else to a vote to take place, for example. Technically, they have the ability to stop a filibuster in the Senate, but they very, 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 very rarely do. I think maybe one time in the 6 years I've been up there. In the House, somebody can stand up and start to talk, but we are not opposed to stopping the filibuster, and we do it all the time, which allows legislation to go through.
You allow 15 minutes, don't you?
15
generally?
minutes,
Yeah.
and 15 minutes this person, 15 minutes
Right,
the next,
right.
and if it goes on too long,
Yeah.
the
floor leader
will stand up and
Yeah.
ask that
Yeah.
it be the debate be terminated.
And that was set up, I think, by our founding fathers, for lack of a better word, I guess, fathers and mothers, to keep legislation from getting too far out of control. In other words, the House of Representatives is the engine, the Senate are the brakes. That's how our republic form of democracy was set up. So you can't just have an overwhelming majority like we've had just take and totally change the face of government. Keep some semblance of normalcy, of tradition or whatever. I think that's why that's in place. And so there's not been a desire to change that filibuster rule, although it could be changed without a vote of the people. It could be done by the entities themselves, but there's not been any interest in doing that because they know where this could take our government in Missouri. It could really take it down a path that, well, we're a special group of people, whether it be far right people or far left people or whoever could pull us really hard, and that's not been the tradition in a republic to do that. There's some semblance of keeping things a little more centralized, without moving too far one way or the other. Then that's, I think, where you could see problems with your republic starting to crumble down the road.
And so the past couple of years, this filibuster has been more common than it has been in the past in the Senate. And as you say, it's normally a result of one of the extremes of the parties taking the floor and not letting it go. And so in Missouri Senate, those extremes are the Democrats, because they are in a minority and they have the ability to stand up and try to hold up legislation until a deal can be made or something that satisfies enough people that they can move forward. And then there's an extreme right-wing group of Republicans in the Senate, that 5 or 6 of them, it varies in numbers, who also use the filibuster to get their way. And so there is maybe, let's say, 15 or so, what would you call traditional Republicans in the Senate. Then there's this one block of 5, I believe. And then there's the Democrats. So what's happened the last few years, particularly this last year, it was almost like a filibuster handoff. Mm-hmm. Okay, the Democrats are going to filibuster for a while and keep anything.
They teamed up.
That's right. So nothing can happen. No bill can move. No vote can be taken, no matter what's going on, because let's say for a while the Democrats don't like it and they're going to filibuster. And so then they'll sit down for some reason or another. And then this other group of particularly right-wing Republicans, not the most of the Senate, but this group of 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 will stand up and they'll filibuster for a while. And so it was kind of, okay, now you filibuster for a while and then I'll filibuster for a while. And then the result was we didn't get much legislation passed. And some of it was legislation that was personally disappointing to me. I mean, I had like one of the simplest bills the world's ever seen, came out of the House, I think, well, I know, without a negative vote. Mm-hmm. And that was a bill to increase our drug treatment courts by adding another element of drug treatment courts called mental health courts. Everybody knows mental health and drug addiction are just sides of the same coin. Mm-hmm. And so that legislation and a lot of similar legislation just didn't get a chance in the Senate because they ran out of time, mm-hmm. the whole session basically, yeah. Because one side or the other was filibustering. Another example of that was a bill I had in the House was a bill to change the way the Constitution in Missouri is amended. And some people like that, some people don't like that. But in my mind, it came about as a result of the phenomenon that recreational marijuana was passed in this state by an approval vote of 15 of the 115 counties in the state of Missouri. 15 counties voted to pass recreational marijuana. The other 100 didn't, and I'm counting St. Louis itself as a county. So that just doesn't seem right to me and a lot of people. And for example, the people of Webster County who who did not want recreational marijuana in their county, now has recreational marijuana from adjoining counties, and the crime and the problems that result from that, frankly, don't stop the county line. I don't
That's
think
right.
that stops
That's
the
right.
county line. So anyway, that bill, which was the highest priority of the House last year, and similarly the year before that, both years were stopped in the Senate because it couldn't come to the vote because of the circumstances we're describing.
Yeah. Perfect. Good explanation, John. That's important stuff right there, and that's really good to understand why things don't get done that need to be done. Now, that's not saying we need to pass 2,000 plus bills, which is probably about how many are filed on an average year. Probably 2,000 bills are filed. But when you only pass 29 and about 20 of those are appropriation bills, which have to be done per the Constitution, which, by the way, is the only thing the Constitution says that the legislature has to do, is to pass appropriation bills and pass a balanced budget. When you see all this rhetoric about, I balanced the budget for the state, I did this. Well, they have to. It's constitutional. The budget has to be balanced. We're not like the federal government where you can operate on a deficit. You can't do that. So that's the only thing they have to do. But anyway, it was disappointing. This year was worse than the year before. Year before was worse than the year before that. It's just continually gotten worse. And what it's doing is it's stymieing anything getting done up there. A lot of wasted time and money. So as you go to the polls, do your homework. Throw these flyers away. Don't pay attention to the flyers. Well, I guess you can pay attention to them. But if you have a question, contact John, contact me, contact any of your friends that might be connected. Be happy to answer any questions that we can for you. And I don't have all the answers because I'm not up there now, but we can at least direct you to people that do. And remember this. Lieutenant Governor Kehoe was elected Lieutenant Governor 4 years ago with hardly any controversy. I don't even think he had a strong opponent. I can't even remember, but none of this came up then. Why didn't it come up then? Secretary Ashcroft was elected Secretary of State 4 years ago. None of this came up then. Why didn't it? What's that tell you? If these people were crooks, that would have all surfaced and been vetted out 4 years ago, right? Here's one. This guy talks tough holding a flamethrower, but he votes like a flaming liberal. His conservative record is nothing more than a pile of ash. I mean, by the way, the only three candidates for governor that did not vote on a gas tax was Ashcroft because he couldn't vote. Eigel and Kehoe both voted on a gas tax.
Talk about gas taxes.
Let's talk about gas tax. That was our next topic, John.
And we only got what, 10 minutes
Isn't
left.
it amazing how fast this time goes?
And the other thing is the personal property tax.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
So we need to hit those. And you and I have worked with some of these people. I'm trying not to advocate for or against any particular individual, but you and I both personally paid out of our pocket an ad for one of these candidates, and so people already know that we both support Lieutenant Governor Kehoe. But other than that, public record that has already been out there, and people want to look who I'm supporting. I think you and I sent a letter out for a candidate. I've made contributions to one candidate. That stuff's all public record. But let's talk about specifics, and that's gas tax. I voted for the gas tax. The gas, and people forget in just a few years what that vote was about. We all know that we have to maintain our roads. We don't want to drive down a highway with a bunch of chug holes that are going to damage our vehicles. But on top of that, if we want to be a state where businesses want to come, where they can move their product over the state highways, we have to have decent highways. And over the past few years, people thinking about, they realize car fuel economy has much improved, which means fewer gallons of gas are being sold, which means the gas tax that was existing didn't go as far as it used to. And on additional thing is Missouri, I think as far as revenue per highway mile, Missouri has an awful lot of highway miles, is very near the bottom, 45, 46, 47. So we are not getting the revenue that other states are getting to maintain our roads comparatively because we have so many roads. The gas tax raised from 17 cents per gallon to, I think, 29.5 will be the max. And that's done over a period of time. And people forget they have ability, people who drive normal vehicles, cars and pickups, to get a refund of that tax money if they want to. And if you go through it and you say, okay, the gas tax right now has gone up a dime per gallon. If you figure out how many gallons your car operates a year and what your gas mileage is, I think you'll find out that maybe you're paying an additional maybe $100 a year or something like that for your car, truck. If you drive more miles, it would be more because of the gas tax. You can get that back. People say, I don't want to get it back. It's not worth the hassle. Well, if it's not worth the hassle, then really, what are you complaining about? I mean, personally, I could get mine back, but I'm happy to contribute to the maintenance of our roads.
It's $2 a week. $2 to $3 a week is about what it amounts to.
And the other thing is the diesel trucks driving across all those miles of roads in our state are out-of-state vehicles. They're buying gas. They're paying the tax. So a very, very significant portion of that increased tax is being paid by out-of-state entities. So that was the deal on the gas tax, and that's why but we make a big deal out of it. Some people do to repeal a tax that might be $100 per car.
Yeah, I think the 12.5 cents to me is the most fair. If any of you ever drove Oklahoma, I mean, a toll road's $4 or something to just go one time from Joplin to Tulsa. It's $4 one time. I mean, and then you got to do it when you come back or whatever. I mean, you're talking about, like I said, $2 or $3 a week, maybe, depending on how much you drive. But the other thing is, there were other options that had been tried in the past. Sales tax was tried. I think a 3/4 cent sales tax one time. That's a significant amount. It was failed by the voters. Probably should have been. But this is something that they could do constitutionally through the legislature because of the way the Hancock Amendment is drafted. It allowed them to do the 2.5 cents per year for a maximum of 5 years. I think it was the right thing to do because we were looking at, I don't know about you guys, but when you look at the accidents that are occurring on I-44 almost daily, the deaths that have touched many of our lives, some good friends. I've lost good friends right out here in the stretch between Lebanon and Springfield over the years. 44's got to be widened through the urban areas, through Springfield, through Rolla, through Joplin. I mean, at least. And the third lane will be a tremendous safety measure to keep those accidents and deaths from occurring. It really will. It's got to happen, but it takes a lot of money to do that. And anyway, it was the most effective way, in my opinion.
Let's compare that just a little bit to income tax.
Yeah, which, by the way, you and I both voted on cuts to the income tax. Go ahead.
And that cut at this point, it goes down in stages depending on the state economy. The state economy has been very good, partly because of issues like having a decent transportation system. And so that is now down about 1%. So if you do them,
it's 1.4.
it will be eventually.
Okay.
But right now, I think it's about 1% of your state income tax. So figure that. If your family makes $50,000 a year that they pay income tax on, 1% of that is $500. Mm-hmm. So that is something that some of these candidates that are running for our statewide officers, and I mean, that's really a public record.
Yeah.
That Lincoln Huff, as appropriations chair in the Senate, and Cody Smith as budget chair in the House, have pushed those tax cuts through. And it's obviously significantly greater than this complaint about the gas tax.
Right. Yeah. You don't hear much credit given for that though.
Right.
Kind of just wrapping up these flyers. I did want to mention probably the worst candidate. I'm not going to mention his name. You guys probably in the Marshfield paper or some of the newspapers, these inserts that would come. This one here was about clowns. He lists the name of all of his opponents and talks about them and how they relate to being a clown. I mean, some of the things that he says, it's just really sad that this person could be a person of faith and talk about others the way that he is. But I'm sure some of you saw these. Here's one. This guy's ruled with fear, corruption, and abuse, and he goes all through all the different things. Negativism. Now, on the positive side, I'm going to tell you, and I don't have all of them because I don't get them all, but Lincoln Huff, I haven't seen a negative ad from him. Lincoln Huff's our neighbor just to the west of here, lives at Fairgrove on a farm. He's my friend. He's John's friend. He's been very supportive of Webster County and helping get funding for our infrastructure, for our overpass, for our new sewer system out there. Lincoln's a good guy. He's not a far right winger. He'll vote common sense, public education, things like that. But his ads have all been positive, and I appreciate that. Another one that's been positive is our current state treasurer, Vivek Malik. His ads have been positive as well. And we've got some good candidates running against each other. I'll give you that. There's some in some of these races that you could go either way. Shane Scholer's a really good guy, Secretary of State. But John and I both know Dean Plocker personally. Dean personally did something to help me when I was in Jeff City, and I'm dedicated to him for that. So there's, I'll just tell you my endorsements: Kehoe for governor, Mike Kehoe; Lincoln Huff for lieutenant governor; Attorney General's race we really haven't talked about. Andrew Bailey is our current Attorney General, and Andrew, I know him, worked with him when I was in Jeff City. He's a really good guy. He's a military veteran. I'm supporting Andrew for that. And then Dean Plocker, Secretary of State, and Vivek Malik for Treasurer. John?
Yeah, as Lyndall knows, we all agree on those except for one. And the one that I would disagree on would be Cody Smith, who's been my budget chair and helped me while I've been in the budget. And he's the guy with the bald ad. And he's
a personal friend, or you have a relationship with him.
Absolutely.
And we should vote for our friends.
And he's helped me with the funds that we've been able to try to get from Marshfield area.
So we're gonna have to wrap it up. Producer Logan Fraker is back, so we appreciate your time today. I hope you found this informative. The one thing that I'm very proud of with John as our representative, we're friends, but we both, I believe, tried to always have common sense and listen to both sides of an issue, and I'm proud of that, and I want to continue that in Webster County. I hope when John terms out in 2 years, after he's reelected, then our next representative will also have that common sense and not be burning down the neighborhood with flamethrowers and all the things that some of these people want to do. And in addition to that, they're burning our party down. So with that, I think we'll wrap it up. Be sure you go vote Tuesday, no matter what. Be sure you vote and vote your heart and understand the issues. Thank you. We'll see you hopefully again next week.